So I've just got up. I'm the late riser of the house. My wife's the early riser, and I don't know where she is. She's gone out to do something or other, but this is already happening. Look, got a load of apples drying in the dehydrator, and it's one of my favourite ways of preserving apples. We've already done some fruit this year, so in here we've got some dehydrated apples, and in here we've got some pear. And they're like sweets. They're lovely. When you dehydrate them, a lot of the starches turn to sugars, so they're even sweeter, and they're delicious. And it looks like my wife is also doing another jam day. So it's the second jam day of the year here. So what a great thing to wake up to. In fact, she's definitely making jam. She's got her jam recipe book. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to cut some hedge feed for the goats, and then I'm going to go and do some work on my perennial vegetable bed. So I'm going to share all that with you. So this is some of the beech hedging that we have here on the property. We've got a tremendous amount of it, and the goats love to eat it. So we're going to kill two birds with one stone, and we're going to tidy up this hedge and create some goat food at the same time. I love this. It's a battery operated hedge trimmer made by Stihl, really good brand, and I've got the chainsaw version as well. They're not toys, they're fantastic bits of kit. So if you can afford it, I recommend these guys. They're brilliant, and part of the beauty of it is that we can charge the batteries from a solar powered charger, so it's all, you know, very recyclable and sustainable. So let's go. So I cut all of these hedges twice a year, and this is really late. This is the last bit of hedging to get its first cut this year. They'd normally get cut towards the end of the spring, early summer. And then I will cut them again right at the end of the season when they're stopped growing, so they are done and look quite nice over the winter. But one thing to bear in mind is the purpose of this is not to make the hedge look nice. The purpose of this is to feed our goats, and the nice looking hedge is a byproduct of that, not the other way around. So as you can see, got some happy goats and a happy sheep. They do absolutely love it. We've got all this hedge down here as well. Now this isn't along this boundary, this isn't a formal hedge, this is just brambles. So this will make up a lot of their feed when the other hedging has come to an end. They're all trimmed up for the winter and they won't be cut again because they've stopped growing. We'll still have all this down through here to feed them. If you've got animals like this, and whatever animals you've got, take the time to enjoy them as well. A poor life this is full of care. We take no time to stand and stare. I'm not sure who wrote that, but so true. Okay, so this is, stretching back out of shot there, is one of our perennial beds. And this is our asparagus bed. I want to spend a minute with you talking about my asparagus bed. It's one of the beds I'm so pleased with. I'm really quite proud of myself for this one. So let's get in there and have a closer look. So this is one of the first beds that we planted when we moved in here. Now the thing is with asparagus is you need to be patient, because if you plant seeds, you're not going to get a crop from that plant for 3 years. Now we planted crowns, which is basically someone's gone to the effort of growing them for that first year, and you get a crown, a clump of asparagus plant. And if you're using crowns, then you've still got to wait 2 years. Now it's been 2 years, and we did harvest this bed slightly this year. We took enough for 1 meal. We took about 12 spears. Now we could have harvested it more heavily, but we made the decision not to, because we're investing in the future. And basically the reason that you don't harvest them earlier, and the reason we didn't harvest them heavily, is because you want the crown to get really big and strong, which these ones are now doing. So we've got 7 crowns in here, and we planted 8. So 1 of them died straight away, but the other 7 are doing really well. So I'm quite happy with that in terms of a success rate. Now, asparagus is one of those crops where not only is it an edible perennial, which is already ticking lots of boxes for me, but it's also one of those prestige crops. It's one of the crops that can take the centerpiece of a meal in place of meat or whatever it is. So asparagus is a really, really valuable crop. It's expensive to buy, and this bed is going to produce for decades. So it's a great investment. Now, what happens is, towards the end of the season, usually you'd stop harvesting, but we stopped harvesting very much earlier than we might otherwise. And the spears, the asparagus spears that you're familiar with, and I'll bring you in to show you a bit closer, they grow on to become these ferns. And these ferns basically do all this photosynthesis, and they build up the energy in the plant. So that's why we've allowed these ferns to grow for longer this year, and they're going to help the plant become healthy and strong and produce really well from here on out. And next year we'll be cropping for much longer, and then just at the end of the season we'll leave 1 or 2 to become these ferns for each plant. So as you can see, I've staked a lot of them, but since I've staked them, we've had quite a few more grow and get big. So I'm going to be staking the rest that need supporting today. As you can see, there's quite a few that have gone over, so I'm going to stake these up. And by bringing you in nice and close, I can show you the stages that the plant goes through. So down here you can see this plant is still producing the spears. I could harvest that and eat it if I chose to, or I can leave it. And basically, when you leave it, it's going to do what's happening here. So this one, as you can see, is probably nearly 2 foot tall, and it's just starting to open up on the ends, and it's going to turn into one of these ferns. So we're going to stake the rest up now, and then I'm going to show you around the rest of this bed. Now, they don't have to be particularly strong, these stakes. They're not doing a tremendous amount of work, so we just use the old bamboo canes that are really on their way out and aren't going to do much else because they're not strong enough. We've got our own bamboo plant, so we harvest the canes from that, and then we use the fresh canes wherever they're needed. And then when they're not quite big enough because they've snapped or they're just old and not strong, then we use them for things like this. Now, one thing that's super important is not to damage the crown. So you want to put the stake in a good distance away from the crown. While I'm in here, I'm also going to just pull any weeds I see in between the plants. Asparagus, because it doesn't give you any ground cover of any note, it is something that's going to suffer from weed competition, and we don't want to hoe in here to risk damaging roots as they get bigger. I could get away with it now, but it's just as easy for me to pull by hand. As you can see in here, we've mulched really heavily, and we've mulched with the byproduct of a big dairy farm's biodigester. So they take the cow waste, the cow manure, and they put it into a big biodigester, and they produce electricity from it. And this is the byproduct, but it's still full of nutrients because the biodigester just uses the methane, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think it just takes the methane. So all the nutrients in that manure is still in here. And because it's been through the biodigester as well, it comes out sterile. So any seeds that might have been in here will have died. And I'm thinking this top dressing of mulch probably went down about 2 to 3 months ago, and this is only the second time I've weeded it, and there's almost nothing growing in it. So far so good. And obviously that's going to break down and feed the soil, and it's going to provide so much nutrients for these plants. So I'm expecting them to just do really well because we provided the best possible environment for them. This is what I really didn't want to happen. So this was led down flat, and I've gone to pick him up and it's just come away. Now all this energy now that's gone into this has just been wasted by the plant. This is energy that it could have put back into its root system and into the crown. So this is, you know, my fault for allowing this to get so big before coming out and restaking everything. So, you know, lesson learned, but this is exactly what I didn't want to happen. But the goats will be glad of it. There, so that's that done. So now I want to show you the rest of this bed. And what we've got is, I need to stand back a bit because it's quite large. So what we've got behind us here, we've got our asparagus patch that we just looked at over there. And then in the front, next to the polytunnel there, what we've got growing is something called wormwood. Now, wormwood's a shrub, and I planted this a year or two ago, and just a couple of months ago it was everywhere. It was coming right out as far as the tripod there, and it was smothering that asparagus plant. It was huge. So we've taken all that back, and that there is a medicinal plant for the animals. It's actually a way of them self-medicating against internal worms. So what we do is we just harvest it periodically and drop it round to all of our animals, and they help themselves basically. Now back there, what we have growing, and you can't really see it very well, but we're about to prune this grapevine so you'll see it a bit clearer, is a goji berry plant. And again, we planted that from, I think we bought it in, you know, one of the supermarket type stores for maybe £1.50, £2, something like that, very, very cheaply, and it was a foot high, and it's really taken over this year. It's going really well. So we're going to cut back this grapevine shortly, and that's going to give it an even better chance. Then just down here, what we've got are some globe artichoke plants. Now these were only planted this year, but they're doing really well. Look, this one's already developing 2 of the globes, with more happening down here. This one's a little bit behind. You're probably also spotting in between here, we've got some volunteer potato plants. Now, I have been pulling them, but the ones I've left in for a reason. I'll explain that in a second. Before we get to the grapevine, the last bit of the planning for this perennial bed is this front bit is going to be raspberries. Now we've got these raspberry canes here, and we've got some others somewhere else on the property that we're going to transplant down here in the winter time. But you'll obviously see behind we've got some corn. Now corn aren't a perennial, they're not part of the plan for this perennial bed, but what was going to happen this year is this entire section out the front, all of this, which has got the raspberries in it, was going to be a Three Sisters bed. We were going to plant corn, beans and squash here, but for some reason the corn didn't germinate. I planted 30 or so corn plants here, and we've had these 8 or 9 come up. So I abandoned that and I put the raspberries in earlier than I was planning to. And that's another reason why I've left these volunteer potato plants, because they're not doing any harm there. We'll pull the potatoes out, and any future volunteers next year we'll obviously cull. Just down here in these pots we've got a couple of hazel plants which are due to go somewhere else, and a couple of sycamores to go into the wood. And that just leaves us with this absolute beast of a grapevine. It is huge. Now, when we first moved in, this entire bed, in fact, this entire bed, the polytunnel, the small bed the other side of the polytunnel, and that big annual vegetable bed up there were all overgrown. Just you see that hedge at the back there behind the vegetable garden? It was basically like that all the way down and forward, just with brambles and weeds, and you couldn't see a thing. But within a few months of being here, we'd cleared all that. And then the following spring, when it was clear, and we'd already decided we were going to turn the top bit into an annual vegetable garden. We hadn't really made our minds up on this bit yet. We were just keeping it clear. This grapevine sprung to life. Now, this grapevine will be decades old. They don't get this vigorous without a tremendous root system. So, and we cut it down again. We cut it right back in the winter. So everything you see here is this year's growth, everything. And there might be 3 or 4 stems that come up from the ground, maybe as high as just the top of the timber work there, over that whole thing, that were previous year's growth. But everything else is this year's growth. And just look at how productive this plant is. I mean, there's grapes everywhere you look. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trim back a lot of this excess growth that we don't need. Believe it or not, it's supposed to be a frame that you walk down. So we're supposed to have it a wall at the back, a wall at the front of grapes, and across the top, and we're supposed to be able to walk down the middle there. So we're going to prune that back now. And yet again, this is just another thing that the goats are going to be a beneficiary of. Now, I am far from an expert on grapevines or pruning, or, you know, I'm not a horticulturalist. Everything I'm sharing with you, I'm learning as I go. So just to bear that in mind. So I'm not telling you how to prune it. I'm telling you how I'm going to prune it. If there are any experts out there, Adam, talking to you, maybe you want to let me know what I'm doing wrong and how we would do it right. But all I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take off a lot of this growth because it's just superfluous to what we want. It's in the wrong place, and we're going to keep anything that's got. So this one here, if this didn't have any grapes on, we might trim it right back, but we're going to trim it just past the grapes and get rid of the rest of the unwanted growth. And again, this is all going to go to the goats. And a tip that I got from Adam on his last video over at Gardener's Tale, Adam, who was on the podcast last week and this week, is when you're using these secateurs, you use the blade side on the side that's staying. It makes sense, really. So if you get any, you know, the blade's where the sharp bit is. So if you get any, you know, mushing or damage of the plant tissue fibre, it's going to be on the side that you're discarding anyway, which is a great tip. Thank you. And you can check out Adam's videos over at Gardener's Tale. That's his YouTube channel. I've had this dill plant growing in there, and it was just doing so well. I didn't have the heart to pull it out, really, but I think it's run its course. It's had its time. So we're going to, God, I do love the smell. We're going to take this in the house and dry it and use it as a herb. So there we go. I got a bit carried away there, and I did round the back as well. I spent a bit of time on it, but I'm so much happier with that. There you go. So that's how it's supposed to look. That's how I want it to look. And just look at how many grapes there are. And it's like that everywhere. Absolutely everywhere you look. Just full of grapes. That's that job done. And I'll just show you down here. This is basically what it was cut back to. Not last year, but the year before, or the year before that, I can't remember, when we actually, you know, uncovered it all. We cut it right down to this level. We literally got it to the point where we ran the mower over all of this. So from that, it's, you know, it just goes to show how strong and healthy the roots are. So really happy with that. That's a great job to have got done. And look at what my girls get. So I'm going to give them that now, and then they've got a little pile here and a medium pile here and a big pile at the back there, which they'll get probably tomorrow. So yeah, no, I'm really happy to have got that job, and I've just noticed I haven't quite finished. There's a few stragglers over here that I need to get hold of over this top bit. So I'll quickly do that, and then I'll feed that to the goats, and then I'll probably go in for some lunch. Just wanted to say as well, actually, the grapes, we use the vines, the leaves, for cooking with as well. So quite a lot of recipes actually call for vine leaves. And so we make all sorts of things, quite often sort of North African inspired dishes wrapped in the vine leaves. Delicious, really nice. So it's not just my girls here that get to enjoy the leaves of this plant. I don't need to worry about, you know, saving these or preserving these, because as you've seen how prolific the plant is, for pretty much, you know, 6 to 9 months of the year, we've just got a constant stream of them. So it's not something we worry about preserving, to be fair. So that's going to wrap us up for today's video. Hope you've enjoyed that. Please don't forget to subscribe and press that like button. Leave me a comment down below if it's something you want to see. But we're just catching the rain now. The rain's coming in, so I'm going to stop filming. I'm going to go in and have some lunch, and then this afternoon we're going to be doing quite a bit of harvesting and taking care of the chickens and the other animals. So that's going to fill the rest of my day, I suspect, and I will be seeing you tomorrow.